Hey, deep divers, welcome back to the show where we'll dive deep. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Today, we're tackling a real head-scratcher, RFK Jr., in a potential second Trump administration, specifically his ideas about health policy.
It's certainly an unexpected pairing.
Right. It's like mixing oil and water, politically speaking. But here we are with Trump reportedly wanting RFK Jr. in the White House and RFK Jr. ready to shake up healthcare. The sources we're diving into today paint a pretty fascinating picture.
What stands out to you?
Well, first, there's the sheer ambition of it all. RFK Jr. wants to tackle the chronic disease epidemic, which, let's face it, is a massive undertaking. He's even talking about achieving measurable results within 2 years.
That's an incredibly tight time frame, especially given the complexity of chronic diseases.
Right.
We're talking about heart disease, diabetes, cancer conditions with multiple contributing factors, from genetics to lifestyle choices. A 2-year turnaround would require a radical shift in approach.
Exactly. That makes you wonder what he has in mind. Then there's this whole mystery surrounding his actual role. Is he going to be the head honcho at the Department of Health and Human Services, or what?
There's been a lot of back and forth on that. Initially, Trump's transition team denied RFK Jr. would lead the HHS, but then the campaign seemed to walk that back.
So what's the deal? Is it a power play, a PR strategy, or are they just figuring things out as they go along? It's like a political game of chess, and we're trying to decipher the moves.
It's worth noting that RFK Jr. has a long history of focusing on health issues, albeit from a somewhat controversial angle. He's been a vocal critic of vaccines, which has earned him both praise and criticism.
Right, and he's not exactly shy about taking on big pharma either. He's even talked about ending corporate capture of health agencies claiming they prioritize profits over public health.
This perspective, whether you agree with it or not, resonates with a segment of the population that feels distrustful of large institutions, particularly in healthcare. It taps into this broader trend of skepticism towards established systems.
So how does this all connect to his vision for health policy? He's laid out 3 main goals, and one that really jumps out is his emphasis on gold standard empirically based science and medicine.
What's interesting here is that he seems to be pushing for a shift away from reliance on industry-funded research towards more independent, rigorous studies. This could have significant implications for drug approvals, treatment guidelines, and even how doctors make decisions.
So less influence from big pharma, more transparency, and potentially a greater emphasis on preventative care.
That seems to be the direction he's hinting at.
Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into this gold standard science idea. What would that actually look like in practice? Would it mean overhauling the FDA approval process, investing more in public research institutions?
Those are certainly possibilities. It could also involve stricter regulations on conflicts of interest in medical research, greater emphasis on data transparency, and potentially even a reassessment of existing treatments and guidelines based on new independent research.
That would be a pretty massive undertaking. But hey, maybe that's what RFK Jr. thrives on, shaking things up and challenging the status quo.
It certainly seems that way. But the question remains, how feasible is it to implement such sweeping changes within the existing system? And what would the consequences be, both positive and negative? Those are questions we'll need to explore further. Welcome back, deep divers.
We're picking up right where we left off, trying to piece together this puzzle of RFK Jr.'s potential role in a second Trump administration and what it could mean for healthcare. It's a story with more twists and turns than your average political thriller.
One of the biggest mysteries is how RFK Jr., with his controversial stances on vaccines and his outspoken criticism of big pharma, fits into Trump's agenda. It seems like an odd pairing, to say the least.
It does, doesn't it? But maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe Trump sees RFK Jr. as someone who can appeal to a segment of voters who feel disillusioned with the current healthcare system and are looking for a shakeup.
That's a possibility. RFK Jr.'s message of ending corporate capture and returning to gold standard science could resonate with those who distrust big institutions and feel like the system isn't working for them.
And remember, Trump himself has never been shy about challenging the status quo. He's built his entire political career on disrupting established norms. So maybe in a way, they're 2 sides of the same coin.
It's also worth considering the political calculus at play. Appointing RFK Jr. to a prominent position, even if it's not HHS secretary, could be a way for Trump to signal his commitment to addressing healthcare concerns without necessarily alienating his base.
Right, it's like a balancing act. He can appeal to voters who are drawn to RFK Jr.'s message of reform while still maintaining his own distinct brand of populism.
But it's not just about politics, is it? We also need to look at the substance of RFK Jr.'s proposals and assess their potential impact. For example, his call for a return to gold standard science sounds good in theory, but what does it actually mean in practice?
That's the million-dollar question. Would it involve a complete overhaul of the FDA approval process? Increased funding for independent research?
Yeah.
Tighter regulations on conflicts of interest in medical studies?
It could involve all of those things and more, but it's important to remember that any significant changes to the healthcare system will have both intended and unintended consequences. We need to carefully weigh the potential benefits against the risks.
And that's where things get tricky. Healthcare is incredibly complex. There are so many stakeholders involved, from patients to providers to pharmaceutical companies to insurance companies. Any attempt to reform the system is bound to face pushback from some quarter.
Absolutely, and that's why it's crucial to have a nuanced understanding of the issues at play. We need to move beyond the sound bites and slogans and really delve into the specifics of what RFK Jr. is proposing and how it would actually work.
So let's try to do that. We've talked about his goal of gold standard science. But what about his plan to tackle the chronic disease epidemic? That's a huge challenge, and he's set a very ambitious timeline of achieving measurable results within 2 years.
It's a bold claim, to say the least. Chronic diseases are, by definition, long-term conditions that develop over time. They're often influenced by a combination of genetic, environmental, and lifestyle factors. Addressing them effectively requires a multifaceted approach that involves prevention, early detection, and ongoing management.
So it's not like you can just wave a magic wand and make them disappear overnight.
Not exactly. It requires a sustained effort over time involving changes at both the individual and societal level.
Okay, so how does RFK Jr. propose to achieve this? What are the concrete steps he's outlined?
That's where things get a bit fuzzy. He hasn't provided a detailed roadmap of how he would achieve these measurable results. Within 2 years, he's spoken broadly about promoting healthy lifestyles, addressing environmental toxins, and empowering individuals to take control of their health, but the specifics are still unclear.
So it's more of a vision than a concrete plan at this point.
That seems to be the case, and it's important to remember that even the most well-intentioned policies can face challenges in implementation. The devil is often in the details.
All right, so even if RFK Jr. does end up with a significant role in a second Trump administration, there's no guarantee that he'll be able to achieve all that he set out to do.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to critically examine the proposals on the table and to understand the potential implications for all of us.
All right, deep divers. We've spent this whole deep dive trying to really unpack RFK Jr.'s potential role in a second Trump administration, his ambitious health policy goals, and the uncertainty surrounding it all.
Yeah, it's a story that's captured a lot of attention, and for good reason, you know? It raises important questions about the direction of healthcare in the U.S., the influence of powerful individuals, and the potential for real change.
And, you know, we've only really scratched the surface here. We've touched on his call for that gold standard science and his plan to tackle the chronic disease epidemic, but there's just so much more to explore.
For instance, we haven't delved into his views on the pharmaceutical industry, the role of environmental toxins in health, or, his specific ideas for empowering individuals to take control of their well-being.
Right. There's a whole other layer to this story that we just haven't even touched yet. And that's kind of what we want to leave you with, deep divers.
What we've tried to do in this deep dive is not just present the facts, but also encourage you to kind of think critically about the information you're encountering, to question assumptions, and to consider different perspectives.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just some, abstract political drama playing out on a distant stage.
It has the potential to impact all of our lives, whether it's through changes in healthcare policy, shifts in the pharmaceutical industry, or even, a broader cultural conversation about health and well-being.
So we want to hear from you, deep divers. What are your thoughts on this potential power duo and their plans for American healthcare?
Do you share RFK Jr.'s concerns about corporate capture and the need for gold standard science?
Do you think he can actually achieve his ambitious goals within the time frame he's set?
And most importantly, how do you think all of this might impact your own life?
Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives, and we'll catch you next time.